Welcome back to another edition of Carolina Now. I'm Kyle Mercier, and joining me on the line is ESPN correspondent and NASCAR analyst Terry Blount, author of the new book, The Blount Report. Discusses everything from the underrated and overrated people, aspects, and all points involving NASCAR. Terry, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you, Kyle?
I'm doing well, man, doing well. Charleston, South Carolina is where we are here, and as you know, being in the South, NASCAR is
That's about as NASCAR as you can get there.
That's true. You know, we're not too far from Charlotte, and the South is kind of like NASCAR Central. So
that's right.
So ESPN correspondent, you've been with ESPN for a long time. I guess originally based out of Texas. I guess that's where your love for NASCAR started, right? Right there in the heart of the South.
Yeah, it was. I worked for many years for the Houston Chronicle and started covering NASCAR there in the early 1990s, and I went on to work for the Dallas Morning News before going to ESPN. So been doing it a long time, really enjoy it. It's a sport that I love to watch. It's a sport that has so many people that are such loyal fans, more than any other sport, and I've covered them all in my career. But NASCAR's fans are so loyal and so devoted, and that's why we thought this book would really be fun for people.
Well, they're diehards, you know, up and down, and it doesn't matter how well that their team does that year. I guess they still come back and root them on the following year, right?
Right, there's no question about it. And they buy the products that are sponsored on these cars, and that's why it's worth sponsoring these cars. And they love it, and they're passionate about the things they like and dislike in the sport. So I think the book will be fun for people. Obviously, they're not going to agree with everything in here. That's kind of the point, is to give people something to debate about and to have fun with. We did it all in fun. This is not a personal shot at anyone or anything. It's really just a statistical look at a lot of issues involved in the sport that kind of taking on some of the sacred cows of NASCAR. ESPN did similar books on the NFL and on college football and Major League Baseball, and they were very popular. But yeah, there are some things in there that people say, wait a minute, I don't believe that's not true. I don't think that's right. So
and if it gets people talking.
That's the point, really.
Right,
that's
right.
the point of it. So it's fun.
All right, well, let's go ahead and start with the economy. I mean, times are tough in the country, and we all know that, but NASCAR is still thriving. I mean, just like, most sports do continue to succeed through tough times. People need their sports, get their minds off things, but I mean, you, of course, attend races, talk about all the races. Have you yourself noticed a difference this year compared to, say, the second half or all of last year, whatever, as far as the crowds go or maybe ticket prices? Because I know NASCAR is kind of an expensive sport.
Well, here's the thing, Kyle. I mean, NASCAR is more affected by a down economy than any other professional sport, and that's because they are so reliant on corporate sponsorship.
Right.
You just can't run this sport without corporate sponsors on these cars. So it has affected them immensely. Almost 1,000 people have lost their jobs on Sprint Cup teams in the off season. But there are some encouraging signs, and a couple happened even last week at California, at Auto Club Speedway now in California. They've had a real problem selling tickets. They often wouldn't get 65,000 people there, and they still didn't sell all the tickets on Sunday. However, the crowd was way up. They had about 78,000 people there. That was a very encouraging sign to me. In a down economy, when they're going head-to-head with the Academy Awards, that they had a really good crowd. The other thing that was encouraging last week and this week, from what I've seen, is that entries are high. We thought they would go to California and there wouldn't be enough cars for a full field. There wouldn't be 43 cars in the Cup Series, or certainly we didn't think there would be in the Nationwide Series. And we thought the trucks might be as low as 20 trucks.
Wow.
But every series sent somebody home. The trucks had 37 trucks in a 36-car field. The Nationwide Series had 47 cars, and the Cup Series had 48. And I hear that the entry list for Vegas this week for the Cup Series is 51 cars.
That's amazing.
That's a very encouraging sign. And the reason that's happened is it's less expensive now to put a car out there and to try and make the field. And that's a good thing. NASCAR needed to go backwards a little bit here. It had become ridiculously expensive, with teams spending $25 million, even $30 million for a sponsorship for a full season on one car or driver. That has to change. It just got out of hand, and I think it is changing now. And so we do have some encouraging signs. There will be tough times ahead, though, in this sport. No question about it. Attendance will probably be down at a lot of places. The speedways have done a lot to lower ticket prices to try and keep people in the seats, but still, People will have to pick and choose a bit, and it'll be a tough time. But NASCAR's been through times like this before. They've always survived. The biggest fear people have is about the auto manufacturers, obviously, whether GM and Chrysler will survive. And if they don't, what that would mean for NASCAR.
Right. Now,
it wouldn't be good. There's no question about that. But it wouldn't be the end of NASCAR. NASCAR has run before without the auto manufacturers being involved.
I mean, in the offseason, you've got that threat of the big three, automakers possibly going bankrupt, asking for bailout money, and so I'm sure it must scare some people.
It does scare people. There's still the chance, especially I think in Chrysler's position, that they won't make it. There's a chance they won't get through the first quarter and still be a company, not as we know them anyway. So the question is, what would happen to those 6 Dodge cars that go out on the track every week? I mean, would they still be Dodges? What would they be? And no one knows the answer to that. But I do know this. NASCAR will go on. There will still be cars out there. Whether there are auto manufacturers actually spending money in the sport or not, it will go on. Now, I don't think it's going to get that drastic. I think GM will survive in some fashion, and Chrysler in some fashion probably will also. And they're still going to spend money in NASCAR because they have to, Kyle. If you're in business, especially a billions of dollars business like these, you have to advertise, you have to market your product, and there's no better way for them to do that than NASCAR. So it will continue. It could change, and it could be a lot less support. It already is a lot less support than it was in the past. But it's not going to be the downfall of NASCAR.
Well, sticking with that whole change theme, now, have you noticed a difference at all with possibly the old crowd and the new crowd? Maybe you've got so many of these new fans that are going to the races. You've got the new racers that are making names for themselves. It's not the petties, and whether it's the Andretti's or
the Labontes and people
right.
like that are all they're going. Kyle, NASCAR made a decision about 2 decades ago that they wanted to do everything they could to be a major national sport and be mainstream. They wanted to make an attempt to even rival the NFL, and they made that decision about 20 years ago, and it was a conscious decision made by the France family with Bruton Smith involved, people like that who said, we can't continue to be just a sport of the Southeast and grow the way we want to grow.
Right.
We've got to get bigger. We've got to get more mainstream. We've got to get more casual fans involved. And they've tried to do that, and they've done it by really marketing their drivers who weren't necessarily from the South, guys like Jeff Gordon, now guys like Jimmy Johnson, even Matt Kenseth. And they've moved and had bigger and better tracks at bigger markets, like the track at Texas, like California, Kansas City, Chicago, all these places where they go now where they didn't used to go, that are big facilities and big markets that the sponsors want. And that has brought in a lot of new fans. Now, on the other side, however, it also has alienated some of their traditional fans in the Southeast. Some of them don't like the fact that NASCAR has gone to this chase format. They believe they should stick to the old whole season points format. They don't like the new car. They don't like some of the rule changes that were made beyond that. They don't like the fact that NASCAR took races away from the Southeast, that they closed Rockingham, that they closed North Wilkesboro, that they took a race away from Darlington, especially the Labor Day race. And there's a lot of fans, traditional fans, that are still bitter about those things. So that's NASCAR's dilemma, really. How do we bring in more and more new fans from across the country but not alienate our traditional fans? And that's kind of where NASCAR is at the moment. At the moment, they're just trying to keep their fan base while keeping the new people they brought in, but they don't want to do too many new things too fast now because they feel like it's hurt them with some of their old fans.
Right. Well, talking with Terry Blount, the author of the brand new book, The Blount Report, NASCAR's Most Overrated and Underrated. You're filling me in on a lot as well because I got to be honest. I haven't been the most diehard NASCAR fan. I know that's going to anger some of my listeners here, but that's fine.
No, that's pretty normal. I mean, that's what most people are. Most people who follow the sport, Kyle,
right,
are people who follow it casually.
Yeah.
The gearhead, the hardcore fan, that's really not the majority of fans. NASCAR claims to have 75 million fans, a number that I debunk in the book, but still, they have a heck of a lot of fans. And most of those fans are not fans that know every driver, every car, every event. They're casual fans. And that's where NASCAR wants to grow.
Okay, well, and that totally fits for me because, being a sports fan in general, I can tell you that Jimmy Johnson has been amazing the past couple seasons. And, I
Sure.
know where different things stand as far as Dale Earnhardt and changing teams and going with the new 88 as far as the 8 and switching things up. And, I try to keep abreast of things. But I got to ask you something. A question that's not bothered me so much, but that's plagued me for a while is how is it or why is it that the season lasts all year long?
Yeah, it really is the longest season in all of professional sports. It's too long, Kyle. But it's hard to go backwards. I put in the book that we have 36 points races and 2 All-Star races. That's 38 weekends over a 41-week stretch. It really is too much, but you just can't go backwards. And the reason is no one wants to give up a date once they have one.
Right.
These races are worth so much money, Kyle. They bring in each Cup race probably brings in an estimated $20 million for that speedway. Not to mention well over $100 million that it brings into the community in general for people coming to that event, staying at hotels, eating at restaurants, all those kind of things. So no one wants to give up a date once they have a date. So it's hard to take dates away. I think the series would be better served if they went back to 30 or 32 races and got rid of a few of the races that probably aren't doing so well, especially some races at a few smaller markets. But I don't see that happening anytime soon because no one wants to give up a date, and NASCAR still believes they can service this many races. So for the time being, it's going to stay like it is, but it is a grind. It's a terrible grind on these crews, Kyle, that have to travel across the country. A lot of these guys who are driving haulers across the country, it's tough. It's tough to have that many events. You really have very little family time from February to the end of November, and it's a long, grinding year. And I think that hurts NASCAR a little bit toward the end because people get a little burnt out. That's really one of the big reasons they started the chase, to try and keep interest up at the end of the year and keep things close. But still, it's tough. Once football starts and you've had so many races already, it's really tough to keep the fan interest up.
Yeah, well, and that segues very nicely into my next topic about the playoff chase, whether or not it was a good thing to be implemented a few years ago. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's certainly plenty of people who don't like it, especially the older traditional fans don't like it. I think it is a good thing. I think it was a necessary thing. Before we had the chase, there were too many years where the champion had run away with the title by September. The final 2 months of the year were virtually meaningless as far as a championship chase goes. And this tries to keep the chase close. Now, it is a penalty for some people if you don't make it. If you're 13th and you've got a good team, your chances of winning the championship are over in September. But the truth is, Kyle, if you were 13th in September, you've got no chance of winning the championship anyway.
You don't belong there anyway.
Whatsoever. Yeah. The other argument people make about it is that only the teams in the chase get on television and get a lot of exposure because they're the ones that are still in the championship. Certainly they get more exposure. But again, all you have to do to change that is win a race. If you're 20th in the standings and you win a race during the chase, believe me, you're going to get plenty of exposure. That's still no different than it was before the chase because the teams that are running up front are always the teams that get the most attention. So I don't believe that argument holds water either. And I do think the teams that are in the chase get far more attention than they would have gotten without the chase, especially if you're running 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. Those teams are still get plenty of attention where they would get no attention if they were running in those positions if there was no chase. So all in all, I think it's a good thing. The last couple of years, they really haven't got the close battle in the final race that they wanted. That's a fluky thing that'll probably change year to year. One thing I would like to see them change is put more of an emphasis on winning, and that is give more points for winning. I would even go so far, Kyle, as to say that if you win a race during the season and you finish in the top 20 in the standings, you would have to put that caveat on it because if you won the Daytona 500 and then you couldn't not stop racing and make the chase. But if you win a race during the year and you finish in the top 20 in the standings, you have earned a spot in the chase. And I think that would add a lot of drama. I think guys would really be going all out to win at certain events, and I think that would help. There's not enough emphasis on winning, especially once the chase starts, so that would be the one thing I would change. But overall, I think having some type of playoff system is the right thing to do. Every sport has done it. You know, the team that wins the most games in a 162 baseball season is not the champion. The team that has the best record in the NFL in the 16 regular season games is not the champion. And the same in the NBA. A playoff system generates income, it generates interest, it adds hype. It's just something you have to do in this era where there's so much competition for the sports dollar. So overall, yes, I think it is a good thing.
And I totally agree with you. If we can just get the people that are in charge of the BCS to agree with you, now that would be
yeah, isn't that the truth? I don't see how they don't get it, but
right.
Yeah.
Hey, Obama's already talking about possibly doing whatever he can to change the BCS, and I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. So, right. Well, like you were saying earlier, now the traveling alone throughout the long season is taxing enough on the crew. Now, everybody's talking about the going green, the environmental, the carbon footprint, if you will. Has NASCAR received any flack for that, perhaps, or have they thought about changing up different ways of getting the cars and the crew to the different locations?
Yeah, they definitely have. They just went to unleaded fuel a few years ago.
Yeah,
something that's been in America for 30 years.
Well, step one, right?
Yeah, they have. But, they do have an initiative this year, Kyle. That is a big initiative for them this year, is to go green. They're trying to do more things. As a matter of fact, most of the teams are working with fans to try and teach people how to dispose of oil properly. They're eventually going to go to other fuels. They're not really close to doing that yet, where they would go to a hybrid fuel. I don't think we're anywhere near that, but they are trying to be greener in a lot of ways, and they realize that that's something that they have to do in this sport. Now, it almost works against the sport. You still have a carbureted engine on these cars, which passenger cars haven't had for almost half a century now.
Yeah.
But they are trying to go greener and do things that will improve the environment. That's a big issue this year with NASCAR. As a matter of fact, when they had the media tour in Charlotte back in January, each year, one of the days is devoted to going to NASCAR's Research and Development Center, where they talk about what they're doing this year. The number one topic they talked about what they're doing this year was their green initiative. That's important to them. They actually even met, believe it or not, with Al Gore and his people.
Wow.
How they could do it.
He
which
is
very
the leading
surprising
expert.
Because that is a little surprising because, as most people know, NASCAR tends to lean to the right a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
So that. But they did meet with him. They met with his people. They asked him questions. What can we do? How can we be better about this? And Al Gore's people gave him a lot of ideas, and they are trying, but. Are they better than most companies? Certainly not. Right. They have a long way to go there, but they are trying.
All right. Well, every little bit helps. So talking with Terry Blount, author of the Blount Report, new book in stores now, NASCAR's Overrated and Underrated. It's a great read. I was flipping through it. And I got to say, one thing that caught my mind, first of all, it's a great book because, and I'm sure there's other people out there, I love to be able to just pick up a book. I don't have a lot of time, whatever. Everybody, this fast-paced world that we live in, I can flip through, read, a few of your lists, a chapter or two, whatever, right, and set it down and come back to it later. And it's not like, oh, what happened last time? It's great.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. So first of all,
very compartmentalized, right?
Yeah, you've done a great job with that. Flipping through the book earlier this morning, I noticed something that kind of caught me off guard. You have most underrated active driver, Dale Jr. Now,
yeah, that will definitely surprise people. I think, as a matter of fact, in the book, the first sentence of that is, well, I caught you by surprise on that one, didn't I?
You certainly did. You certainly did.
Yeah.
So explain yourself a little bit.
I'll tell you why I listed it in that way. Several reasons. But here's the primary reason. If his last name was anything besides Earnhardt, Smith or Jones or Timbuktu, for that matter, mm-hmm, I think he would be considered a really good Cup racer. He's won 18 Cup events, Kyle. Believe me, you don't win 18 times at the Cup level on luck.
Right.
It just doesn't happen. That's pretty impressive in itself. He's made the chase many times. He's been close to a championship at least 2 times. So he actually is a pretty decent driver. However, no one can be his father. Right. No one ever will. And people still have some expectations for him to be that kind of competitor. He can't be that, and he never will be, and no one will. But let me add a couple of other things about his career. The most difficult time of his life, obviously, was when his father died in 2001. It was right at the time that Junior was about to come into his own as a driver. It was extremely tough on him. He all of a sudden became the focus of the sport. Everywhere he went, everything he did, people were there watching. And he couldn't even go to a grocery store without being overwhelmed by people. So at that time, the most difficult time of his life, he raced better than he had ever raced before.
He won Daytona
consistently.
Right?
He won the next Daytona race. Right. He won consistently. He finished in the top 5. And at the time, DEI was still competitive. Now, when DEI started to go downhill, and the truth is, DEI basically was crumbling around him. I'm talking about Dale Earnhardt Inc., for people who don't know, the team he drove for. They were crumbling around him, and his career went downhill a little bit, but not because of his own doing, but because that team was basically cratering. And at that time, he went downhill.
Well, there's a lot of drama between him and his stepmother, correct?
Tremendous amount of drama.
Right.
They also made a very bad technical decision in switching crews between him and Michael Waltrip at one time a few years ago. Just a lot of bad things happened that were out of his control. And he went downhill a little bit. Now, he went to Hendrick last year. It was an okay year. It's a first year to new team is always tough. He still made the chase. He won a race. But people are going to expect a lot more this year. And if he doesn't pick it up this year, then those claims that he's overrated will go again, because he definitely has the equipment now, and he needs to step it up. And I think he will, but I think he's been maligned a little bit unfairly for no other reason, just because of his last name and because people expect him to be his father. That's just something no one can do.
Right. Well, speaking of Dale Earnhardt now, and I know he is he's a big role model for a lot of people in the NASCAR world. Speaking of role models now, I mean, we've had just in the past 2-3 weeks alone, you've got A-Rod with the steroids, Michael Phelps with the water bong, and Chris Brown and beating up on his girlfriend. I mean, you've got a lot of these stars, a lot of these people that they don't portray the best image. They don't do their job, if you will, as a role model. Tell me a little bit about how do you think the drivers handle being role models, having people look up to them, being their mentor, if you will, or people that they strive to be if they're just getting into the sport, or even just to their fans.
That's a good point. I think this sport is better at that than any other for several reasons. One is a reason in a way because they have to, and that is all these drivers are aligned with corporate sponsorship that pay millions and millions of dollars to be on their car and expect them to have a certain image. As a matter of fact, at each race, they have hospitality suites they go to and tents where they meet big money people of these sponsors, either employees or people that are clients of these sponsors. They have to project a certain image. They have to be clean, so to speak, in a lot of ways, because they'll lose that sponsorship if they're not. So that has helped a lot. But beyond that, this sport has a lot of guys that kind of came up hard and came up without money and really appreciate where they are. And the biggest factor too is that they're in a piece of machinery that's going 200 miles an hour with 42 other guys going 42 miles an hour. And the thought of being out there with somebody who's impaired in some way by some kind of substance is a very scary proposition. Has that happened? Yes. As we saw last year, there were the reports of a truck racer, Aaron Fike, who at one time was running some truck races on heroin. And it was a huge shock to NASCAR. And it forced them to change their policy on how to handle drug testing, which they have done. In the past, it was just, if we think you might have a problem, we'll test you. That's just not good enough these days in this society, Kyle.
Right.
There's a lot of people who can fool you, and they changed that. Everyone is drug tested now, and there's going to be random testing at every race. I give NASCAR a lot of credit for making this change. The drivers were all for it. And, by the way, no driver has tested positive so far this year. Will it happen? Sure, it'll happen. That's just a factor of our society these days. If you have enough people in one place, you're going to find somebody who's abusing some type of substance.
Yeah, that's more than they can say about any other sport that's out there. I mean, you've got the baseball, football, whatever.
But I do think there's less in NASCAR than any other major sport. And that's a factor of what they're doing. They're driving a car at a very high speed, and no one wants to be physically impaired while doing that. That doesn't say someone won't do these things, because they have and they will. But I think we'll see a lot less of that in NASCAR. And I think that's one of NASCAR's great appeals, is that people see these drivers as people not only they can look up to, but people that they see as themselves. People that, if not, well, maybe I could have been that guy, or that guy's a lot like me. And now these guys make an awful lot of money. Right, they're not really like you.
Not so much. I work in radio, Terry.
Yeah, they're still seen that way. They're still seen as the average guy, where I think other sports, the NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball, the guys are seen on a pedestal now because all their salaries are known, and so many of the things they've done haven't been good, especially in baseball. So NASCAR's in a good place there compared to other sports.
Well, excellent. Closing it out here, Terry Blount, thank you very much for joining us. I've got a few more little questions that I just want to throw at you real fast. Your most memorable NASCAR moment. You've been following it for so long, so many years. Tell me one thing that sticks out that you'll never forget that's probably the most memorable NASCAR moment for you.
Yeah, there's two sides to that, Kyle. There's memorable in that it's memorable because it was such a sad moment, and there's memorable because it's good. I'll tell you my favorite moment ever as far as a happy moment was the day Dale Earnhardt Sr. won the Daytona 500 in his 20th try back in 1998. That was a wonderful moment for everyone involved. He had come so close so many times. He had been the best driver in the sport for many years, but just had not won the Daytona 500. And when he got it done that day, it was such a happy day. Every crew member of every team walked out onto the front stretch and shook his hand as he drove by on the lap after he won. And he came up to the press box after that, and he pulled a little monkey out of his suit, out of his fire suit, and then threw it. And he said, "I finally got that monkey off my back."
There you go.
And it was a great moment. And then, of course, the opposite side was 3 years later, the day he died, an incredibly difficult moment for NASCAR and really for America. This was a guy who was an icon to so many people. He was the blue-collar man's hero. And he was so beloved, and that was a tragic day for NASCAR. The one good thing that came out of it is safety has advanced 1,000% after that, and because of that, really, it's sad it took that for it to happen, but it has happened since then, and that was a very sad day. All
right, well, all those new walls along the sides of the tracks and the turns, that's primarily because of what happened that day, and like you said, very good advancement in the world of safety after that moment. So, all right, a few more here real fast. Craziest thing you've ever seen, whether it's on the track or off the track, and I'm going to assume that it probably involves Tony Stewart.
I don't know, Tony. We're so used to Tony, we're just kind of numb by it. He doesn't. His craziness doesn't even affect us anymore. He just, he's going to throw a temper tantrum every now and then, and
right.
He's kind of used to it. So it's no big deal. I've seen some crazy things. I guess one of the craziest things was a big jackrabbit that ran out on the track at Infineon Raceway once in the
during
middle of the race.
Wow.
And luckily, it didn't get hit.
What are the odds of that?
That was really a funny incident that happened. There was a very funny incident last year that I actually put in the book about Jack Roush calling a Toyota official an ankle-biting chihuahua because he had criticized Jack, and that was very funny. Jack still has a very big problem with Toyota. And that was an extremely funny incident when that happened. There's all kind of things that catch you by surprise. Sometimes NASCAR is good about guys saying things you don't expect, and that happens pretty regularly, actually.
Can always rely on NASCAR to provide some entertainment on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, definitely. So those are a few things like that were wild and crazy. There's certainly been some accidents that you just go, my goodness. I've seen some horrible accidents where no one even got a scratch, especially at Daytona and Talladega. Once when Elliott Sadler did 12 barrel rolls down the track at Talladega and walked away without a scratch.
It still blows my mind when they walk out of those things.
It is. It's amazing. So, there's the unexpected happens quite often when you're watching a NASCAR race.
All right, and last one here, Terry. The dark horse for this season. Who do you think's going to pull it out, man?
Well, I think there's a couple of guys that will surprise people to do really well. One is David Reagan of Roush Fenway Racing in his third season. He really stepped it up last year in his second year. He almost made the chase. I expect him to make the chase this year, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if he contended for the title. I think he's that good. He has that kind of talent. Another one that I expect to do well is Brian Vickers. I think that Red Bull Racing team is getting a lot better, and I think he's an extremely talented driver. I think he's on the verge of getting to the chase level. So that's two guys that people can look to that I think might surprise some people this year. And the other one is Juan Pablo Montoya. I think he's going to race really well now that his team has merged with DEI. That's made both those teams a little better. He's got Chevrolet power now. He's raced well in the first two events. It wouldn't surprise me if Montoya made the chase for the first time. I think he's finally learned all the ovals now. He's very talented as a racer, and I think he could surprise some people this year.
Well, excellent, Terry. I've got your picks jotted down here, so we'll see how the season unfolds, man. Thank you very much. ESPN correspondent, ESPN analyst for NASCAR, Terry Blount, author of the new book, The Blount Report, NASCAR's most overrated and underrated in the sport. Check it out in stores now. Terry, it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Kyle, I enjoyed it.
Excellent, man. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Okay, bye.
All right, bye-bye.